about how hard you hit. It's about how hard you can get hit and keep moving forward.
To infinity and beyond!
Some people without brains do an awful lot of talking, don't they?
It's classified.
You talking to me?
I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you.
I can't lie!
Expecto Patronum!
Entertainment X.
You never know what you're going to get.
For this episode, I sit down with Aaron Galligan-Stierle, and this man is an anomaly. I worked with him a little over a year and a half ago in Parade the Musical, and I got to watch him perform, and he is incredibly talented. His craft is just on point. He's not only a musical theater performer, he has done a lot of Shakespeare. We talk about his relationships in the industry and how they led to him booking jobs. He also talks about how he never has a downtime because when he has free time in his life schedule, he fills it with another passion of his. And I think this is essential for any performing actor, actress in the industry, that you don't just focus on performing in someone else's project. You make your own projects and you make your own opportunity, because you notice all the people at the top do that. They're not just performers. They do so much more. And this guy is at the top, and this guy does so much more. We talk about the classes that he teaches, Max Theatrics, and we discuss a film that he helped create. And it's just there's so much stuff, too much to list here. So I really hope you enjoy this episode with Aaron Galligan-Stierle, and keep on keeping on. We're back with another episode of Entertainment X, and today with me is Aaron Galligan-Stierle. Aaron, thank you for sitting down.
Of course, my pleasure, sir.
This is going to be a fun conversation.
Absolutely, I'm excited.
We met almost 2 years. No, it's 2 years ago. Will be next summer doing Parade at Finger Lakes.
Yeah, so about a year, just over a year ago. Yeah.
Yeah, and I marveled, and the Ensemble guys talked about it the whole freaking run at your professionalism.
Thanks, man.
I'm just going to get right to that.
All right, thank you.
The one thing that stands out in my mind was when we were doing the trial scene.
Okay.
And you're singing Hard to Speak.
My Heart, yeah.
My Heart. And it was almost like you were completely in it, and it was like you're about to cry, but you weren't, because your voice never broke. It was like your singing technique was perfect while you were almost losing it, explaining your innocence. Okay. And that blew my mind, because I was like, how do you get yourself to that point emotionally but not affect the vocal technique?
Thanks, man. I mean, yeah, it's an interesting balance, right? So, one of the things I talk a lot about is I talk about the importance and the difference between inspiration and craft. Okay. And that both of them are absolutely essential for what we do, and yet they're both equally important. Because, there's a lot of people, I work as an audition coach a lot, right? So one of the things that a lot of times comes up is this idea that I wasn't connected, so it was bad. Right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And the reality is that, it's not about whether you are connected. It's about what story you're telling and what the audience is receiving and experiencing. And we have to have that inspiration. We have to have that connection. We have to have that humanity. And we have to figure out ways to tap into that. That's an absolutely essential part of the process, because it allows us to find the truth, right? But simultaneously, we also have to find a craft and work on our craft that will allow us to tell that story no matter what, whether we're connected or not, or we're connected too much, right? It's a balance. And I think the craft part is not as talked about. That, sometimes I'll be coaching somebody and I'll go, wow, that was amazing. And they'll go, that was terrible. I wasn't connected. And I go, no. It was amazing if we got it, whether you felt it or not. You know what I mean? I don't know. I don't know that answered your question exactly about the technique of singing while emoting, because I mean the great gift of that production and that show was that I was surrounded by artists that allowed me the space and allowed me the
connectivity.
It's connectivity. It's a connectivity, but it's also I talk about this a lot when I'm talking about acting and my coaching and such is I call it's straight out of Meisner, right? Pinching and ouching. This series of like responsiveness. Someone pinches you and you ouch back, and your ouch is the next line, and then your ouch turns into their pinch that becomes an ouch back to you. And there's this series of responses back and forth, right? And one of the things that was such a gift in that process was that I was surrounded by all of these actors who were willing to be available to me. And I created a series of flags in the sand that I knew that every time I could look at that one person at that one moment and get this one thing, because they were committed to and I never talked to them about it. I never said, hey, will you make sure you give me this look, give me that, but there was a consistency and a commitment to responding and giving me the space I needed to get to where I needed to emotionally. And so, I mean, I remember very vividly that, the 2 or 3, more than that, it's, there's like 5 different specific moments in that show that happened, in that particular moment. There was this moment where I turned around and God, what was her even name? Was it one of the kids? Was it Addie or? Yeah, there was Addie and. What were their? Shannon. Yeah. No, it wasn't Shannon. It was Addie and. Okay, we'll edit this out. But I looked up, and one of the kids at that moment, right before I started this song, would always give me this look, right? Would always give me this look that was so accusatory and so clear in her face that I was a terrible human, right? Then that's the moment, right? That the character is surrounded by people who believe that he is guilty.
It was like 30-1 on the stage, literally.
Yeah, and looking up at that and what it was seeing that youth filled with so much hate and so much clarity about what I had done wrong and not understanding that I was innocent.
Yeah.
Just bounced right into, not bounced in off me, but it penetrated me and allowed me to go, oh God. And it just got me there. It just got me there. There's not, to me, there's nothing worse than the idea of innocence ruined.
No.
And that that just felt like such a moment of that.
Oh my God.
So it was very affecting.
Yeah, part 2 of our conversation will be just Parade alone when we sit down next time. And I have one more question about that, and then we'll move on to the plan stuff. Did you ever ask a lot of questions in the rehearsal room, or have you always not asked so many questions? Or did you ask a lot of questions? Because, for instance, and I asked this question because when we were rehearsing, watching you work in the rehearsal room, not to be a creep, you just did it yourself, and it was like you went through it, and until someone, the director or something, spoke to you, it was just you working. You didn't ask a lot of questions.
Yeah, I think that's dependent on the project.
Okay.
I think is the honest question there.
Okay.
For Parade, it was one of those shows. There's easy shows and there's hard shows, and I don't mean by they're universally easy or hard. I mean they're easy or hard for you. Mm-hmm. There's certain things that you do, and that's what you do, right? Mm-hmm. And the show before this that was the example of this, which is hilarious because it couldn't be more different of a show, was a production of Comedy of Errors that I did, where I was like, oh no, I know exactly what that is. And I know how to slot into exactly what that is. And then there's other shows that I've done that I've gone, wow, what is this? How do I live inside of this? How do I create this character that makes sense with these words? And, there's something about it. For whatever reason, literally from the day I read that show and started working on it, I went, I know everything. I know what this is. I know what this show is. Doesn't mean I didn't have things to learn. It doesn't mean that Brett Smock, just the genius of geniuses. You got to get him on the show. I mean, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
That Brett Smock, didn't have an extraordinary amount of wisdom that he was able to guide me to my ultimate performance. But I just came in with a confidence knowing what I wanted to do there. And then I also am lucky that, I have watched extraordinary artists basically my whole life. And I have, let's be clear, I've stolen from them. I know exactly how they've done it, and I try to bring that to myself. And I'm not interested in wasting time. I want to get in there. I want to make as many choices as I can. I want to figure it out in the room, figure it out with the people around me, and then kind of just see where it goes from them. So in that process, you're right. I didn't ask a lot of questions, but I think in other shows, I can ask more questions.
Okay.
I guess it just depends.
Yeah, it's like a balance.
Yeah.
And then, okay, so moving in, this transitioning here, your relationships in the industry, your views on relationships, professional relationships, I noticed, again, and I keep going back to this because this is the last thing we worked on together, was even though you were a lead, you were still a part of the cast, meaning you would take time to hang out with the ensemble, which sounds like, why are you mentioning that? Whatever. But that's important because there's the camaraderie of the group before you go on stage and have your separate roles that you play. And I noticed your balance with that was just incredible because you weren't separate ever from the group.
Man. Thanks.
So were you ever separate from the group? Is that something learned? Is that another thing you've modeled from other people that you've seen work in the leading roles?
Yeah, I think that it's twofold. I think that a lot of that comes from two things. The first thing is that some of the most instructive parts of my career and upbringing as an artist have been at the Utah Shakespeare Festival. And I did 7 seasons there over 11 years. And when I started there, I was basically a spear carrier. And by the time I left there, I was doing the Dromio in Comedy of Errors, and I was doing, Billis in South Pacific, and I was playing lead roles. And the journey of that experience, where what's so special about Utah Shakes, there's a lot of things special about that place. It really is. I consider it my artistic home. But one of the things that's very special about that place is that the sense of community and the sense of ensemble. And that, even when I was in the ensemble and I was a spear carrier, when I started, I was, I was still playing little bit parts, and I was understudies for leading roles. And I would be in a show with one day the lead would be the lead, and then it's all in rotating rep, right? So then the very next night or later that day, if you're doing a matinee in the evening, you'd go into a show, and that same person who was the lead, who was playing Hamlet in the afternoon, that night is in the ensemble of the musical with you. And and it's not like it's not like it's low level. I mean, this is a Tony Award winning theater where people have been, playing leads in Hamlet, for 20, 30 years of their lives, and they're in the ensemble of the next, it's extraordinary. So what it does is it raises the game across the board. So that was a big part of my growth as an artist, and getting to know the importance of up-leveling everything in that way. So that's a big part of it. And then the second thing I would say is that, from many of the shows that I've done, I can feel a real shift in the energy of the room and the commitment to the piece when you have a strong leader. And you need people in that room who are deeply committed to the process, but also simultaneously inspiring and rallying the group and making sure that everybody is as invested as they are. And the only way we can really do that is if we all are on the same page and we're all working together towards that. And having been in the ensemble of shows where an example of this was when I was in Ragtime. I did a production of Ragtime that started at the Kennedy Center and then transferred to Broadway. And there were a lot of extraordinary artists in that production. And I often talk about lessons that I've learned from different members of that production. But I will say that in terms of this leader question, the gentleman Quentin Earl Darrington, who is playing Cole House in the show, who's right now in Once in This Island and has done all of this amazing work, he was our leader. Whether, and there are other people that may feel that other people were their leaders because it's such an ensemble show, but he was my leader, certainly. He had the heart that show required, and he had this ability to make sure that everyone in the company felt deserved to be there, felt part of the story, felt emotionally connected to what we were doing, and he would make sure that he was always talking to everyone in the group and connecting with you before the show, during the show. We all just had moments of connecting with him, and that was through his outreach and his heart. This gentleman has one of the biggest hearts of anyone I know. And I just said, when I have the opportunity to play the lead, I need to do it in every show. I want to create community. But in particular, when I'm playing a lead in a show, especially on a show that is so emotionally full and requires that deep commitment, I'm going to need to connect and make sure that we create this ensemble. And so I very much modeled my experience in Parade off of what I observed Quentin doing, and then simultaneously what I learned from Utah Shakes.
Wow. Yeah, because before we started the conversation, we were talking about modeling and how you could save a lot of time if you just take things from people that have already done it, that works for them, and see if it works for you. So
yeah, absolutely.
Okay, good. Yeah. Good answer. I want to completely change gears now, because you don't just perform on stage. I want to talk about Ruin Me.
Okay.
A film you produced and was casting director for.
Right.
How did that come about? Why did you get into that?
All right. So I do, I guess over the course of our conversation, we're going to slowly reveal all my jobs.
Yeah, slowly. That's the goal.
Because I do a lot of different things. So the experience of Ruin Me comes out of a very specific relationship that I have that I've had for most of my life. So when I was a freshman in high school, I became best friends with this guy named Preston DeFrancis. He lived 3 blocks away from my house. We rode the same school bus. We didn't have the friendliest school bus in the world, so the two of us sort of like looked out for each other. He probably looked out for me far more than I looked out for him, but we sort of looked out for each other on the bus. We both were in freshman intro to theater. We were both in freshman choir. We both did freshman speech team, and we just became absolutely best friends and inseparable. And he has been probably the most constant relationship I've had, other than my literal parents and siblings of my family, in my whole life. I talk to him multiple times a week, no matter what's going on in our lives. He's just one of my closest and dearest friends.
Where'd you grow up?
Wheeling, West Virginia.
Cool. Okay.
I started in Florida. I started in Boynton Beach, Florida, but then I moved to West Virginia when I was in 5th grade.
Okay.
And then, met Preston when I was a freshman. And that relationship has just has continued. And one of the things that we're probably gonna talk about a bunch is that one of that I absolutely learned from my parents and the way that they function is that so many of my relationships in my life of people that I consider my closest friends and are all relationships that I created and formed through work, through projects, through accomplishment. And that was my entire relationship with my dad my whole life, was that, and it still is that, my time with him was always, hey, Aaron, let's paint this room, or let's go mow the lawn, or let's go, work on this project together, or we're going to, dig a ditch, whatever it was. It was always project based. And that's how I formed that's how that relationship stayed alive, was that we had stuff to do. And that's definitely a big part of my relationship with Preston. And starting when this is the longest answer to your question about Ruin Me ever.
No, it's just creating more questions, which is great.
Okay, good. So when we started out in high school, we both were in theater, passionate about film, and we both basically went in 2 different directions. I headed to New York City. Well, I went to school and headed to New York City and decided to spend my life in live theater. And he decided to spend his life in film and television. So he moved to LA. He went to grad school at USC. lives in LA. He's still out there. He's a writer and a director and all of these things. So every film project that Preston has done, including some of his projects while he was in school at USC, I was his number 2. I've always been his number 2, and he's been sort of my number 2 on many of my projects. And it always works that I'm his creative producer. Basically what that means to us in our relationship is that it starts with him saying, hey, Aaron, I have this idea. And from that moment until the movie is completely done, every artistic decision is a conversation between us. Ultimately, he decides everything. He's where the buck stops because he's the writer, he's the director. In the case of Ruin Me, he's a co-writer. But he that's where the buck stops. So he always makes the decisions. But my job is to confirm his opinions, challenge his opinions, think about new ideas, throw out other options. And we do that through the entire process, whether that's batting around an idea, writing the script, casting the project, on set while we're filming, editing. There's no part of the process that I'm not involved in creative decisions. So he made a number of short films leading up to Ruin Me. Ruin Me was our first feature film. He and his co-writer Trista Bissett, and we put together a group of 5 producers. All 5 of them each had our own job, So one person was sort of the person in charge of organizing everything. Not my job. Some people were in charge of more focused on money and contracts and that kind of stuff. We each had our own thing. My job was artistic. My job was oversee all artistic decisions, basically from beginning to end, which of course then included casting. So I really took the lead in terms of the casting piece of it. We received about 3,000 submissions per role. Of course. I know, right? I went through all of them. Yeah. I decided, I narrowed it down for the team. I got them the materials they needed. I weighed in on every step of whether I think people should move forward or not. And ultimately,
did you pull from New York or LA casting pools or both?
It was mostly LA.
Okay.
But we did absolutely see some people from New York. And in fact, one of the actors, one of our leads, Matt Delapina, came from New York. He's an actor. In New York, he now, of course, has since moved to LA. Yeah. But it was a pretty good mix, but it was mostly LA. Yeah. And that's how I got involved in it, and that's what I've been doing, and going from there.
Did you come up with the idea? Did he come up with the idea? Had you guys been saying like, let's write a horror thing?
Oh no, it was definitely them. I mean, at the end of the idea, here's the thing. I am in no way. It's one of the things that I feel like kind of helps me with my success is I know very clearly what I do well. I also know very clearly what I do not do well.
It's great for that.
And
that's important.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, one of the things that I definitively do not do well is the original creation.
Okay.
The writing, the initial idea, those are things that I don't do. Something that I do exceptionally well is I take someone else's idea and make it better.
Let's talk after this.
Okay, and that's just one of the things that I do.
Yeah,
I mean, like I said, you know what you do. I know what I do and I don't do. And so Preston comes up with an idea. He says, "This is what I'm thinking," and I go, "Great." And they do all the dirty work. And then I'm the first person who they bounce it off of. They get in the room, he and Trista, they figure it out. They put together this is what's going to happen, then this, then this, then this, then this, then this. Here's what's going to work. Here are our characters. Then they go, Aaron, what do you think? And I go, this works, that doesn't work, this doesn't work, try that. And they go, great. And then they go away, and then they come up with, how do we solve these things? I mean, they do all of the work. I do the bouncing off of.
Okay.
That's and that's how a lot of my creative endeavors are. That's where I put my focus. As a director, it's the same thing. That's why I like directing, is because I don't have to create anything. I take all of the best ideas that are there script, music, actors, designers, and I go, great, here are the things we want. And then I go, I don't like that enough. Give me another solution.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And then they like come up with something that's far better than anything I could ever come up with. But I help sort of like lead the charge.
Yeah.
That's where my skill set lies for sure. Same thing with coaching. That's why I love coaching, because my job is to sit there. You come in, you bring all of your choices, all of your decisions, all of your stuff. I watch it and then go, great, here are the things we could do to make that better. I love that.
Yeah.
You know, that's the thing that I do well. The original creation, I tried it once. It's not happening again.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so diversifying as an actor, you do many things to keep your one, logistically, it keeps you afloat when you're not performing, say, on stage, and two, obviously, it keeps you fulfilled artistically. Yeah. Was there a time when you had a realization where you're like, okay, I need to do more than just perform on stage, or was it all organic? Part two to that, is there advice you'd give to an actor that's kind of wants to create, but they're going to their day job and just auditioning, but they know they should be doing a little bit more in there?
Yeah, so there was definitely not a decision moment for me. It's been very organic, how it's all sort of flowed out of where my skill sets lie and the things that I'm passionate about. And finding other people that I like to collaborate with and work with. And, you know, the Ruin Me thing came out of that, and teaching has come out of that. You know, all of these things really come out of things that I'm interested in and work on and like to do. And thank goodness for it, because it allows, like you said, you do a little bit of a lot of different things, especially as an artist. And oftentimes that's your best shot at financial stability. Right? Because when one isn't happening, you can kind of zip over to another one and develop from there. And, you know, I think that I don't know that I necessarily set out knowing that I was going to do this, but the lesson that I've certainly learned is that figuring out a way to monetize the things you love certainly helps us get out of the day job doldrums, you know? And I also know that I know that I'm an exception. I know that I'm extraordinarily lucky in terms of a lot of the way things have unfolded for me, because the reality is that, you know, I say sort of jokingly, but it's kind of real, that I really only have had an actual day job for 6 months of my life. My first 6 months when I moved to New York City. The first 6 months I worked as a front desk receptionist at Chelsea Studios.
Okay.
And it might have been 9 months. It was like 9 months. It was right in there. And simultaneously, I was doing some catering. And I did that catering for that 9 months, and then sort of off and on for the next like 3-4 months. But sort of intermittently. I didn't do a whole lot of it. And I have basically been able to make my living off of some element of live theater and that art otherwise. Now, the reality is I have a day job, right? I am a full-time professional audition coach. You know, that is a huge portion. If you look at the hours in my day, I spend more hours doing that than anything else. But I don't think of it as a day job. I think of it as an extension of my art, of the things that I'm passionate about and that I love, which is being in the room, creating art, figuring things out with clients and other professionals and colleagues, and teaching those classes. And that feels like part of my passion. So that's what I would say, is that, you know, yeah, we're all going to have day jobs. You know, there's no world in which, I mean, I guess there's like the 0.0001% of the person who can literally make their life just acting or directing or whatever it is that they're going after, right?
Right.
The rest of us are going to have to figure out other things that we can find passion in. But if we can find passion that also we can monetize, then it doesn't feel like a day job. It's part of it both fills you with life and excitement and allows you to keep moving forward. And it also simultaneously can be part of the connective tissue that allows you to continue to build relationships that can blossom into other artistic work, whether it's that thing or something else, you know.
Did you start teaching right after those 9 months?
No. I just so early on, I got very lucky, and I just worked nonstop as an actor in my very first couple years here. So I turned equity at the end of my first year in New York City, and I kind of just didn't stop working. I got very, very lucky. I had a number of relationships that really, a director, dear friend of mine named Russ Trays. He was working at he worked. In the course of something like 3 years, he worked at, I want to say, 4 or 5 different theaters, and hired me for 5 different shows at 5 different theaters. So then also, not only was I working with Russ consistently, but I was also now meeting all the people at those theaters. And then those people hired me for other jobs.
Yeah.
And I was working at Utah Shakes regularly. So that, and the way that Utah Shakes works is that it's a 4-month or 6-month contract, depending on which one you get. So I was at times booked for 6 months. Then I would be done for those 6 months. I'd come back and do a Russ Trays show. And then I, would get lucky and book something else for a little bit. And then next thing I know, I'm back at Utah Shakes again. Or, and then in the breaks in between those, then I book a Broadway show, or it was crazy. So that really was my, I was working very consistently. Many of those theaters were tiny little, they were like $250 a week. But at that point, I was married. I didn't have kids. My wife and I lived in this studio apartment that was like 600 square feet. I don't know, maybe not even, like 450 square feet. It was tiny. We were paying nothing, right? So we had no living expenses. Yeah. And so $350 a week, like, okay, sure, no problem. That pays my bill. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I was able to do that. It wasn't until it was about 7 years ago that I started focusing on coaching. Yeah. And then it was really 5 years ago where it took off. And there were a number of things that were all kind of happened simultaneously. One of them is that I had my first child, Devin. And when we had our first child, I was just finishing up it was like a 1.5 year run at Phantom of the Opera. And I needed to have a little bit more stability financially. So I decided I was going to commit myself to trying to build this coaching career. I felt like it was where I was supposed to be and what I was supposed to be doing. Simultaneously, or within about a year of that happening, one of my mentors, a gentleman named VP Boyle, who had created a company called Max Theatrics, was one of the very first audition training programs for professional musical theater artists in New York City. Yeah. He, who I had trained with and done all of his classes, he decided that he needed to move to LA to take on some exciting artistic adventures out there. And when he did, he essentially gifted me his company. And we were business partners, but essentially he handed it to me and said, go have fun. So I inherited that experience, and then those things took off, and a lot of things sort of kind of all happened at once, and I was able to start focusing on being in the city a little bit more, and let that career sort of start to take off, and really now has become a primary thing that I do. I'm getting more and more selective about what artistic projects I do, for 2 reasons. One, because, or probably 3 reasons. One is because I want to be home more, since my kids are 6 and 4 at this point. They're, and I want to be around as much as I can. Of course. Simultaneously, I also, I make good money as a coach and as a teacher, and it's getting harder and harder to take jobs that are considerably less money than that. Yeah. And then simultaneously, I'm getting more selective about where my passion is, where I want to put my energy. And that's probably one of my, that's the biggest lesson that is a challenge, and something that I'm constantly working on. My wife is Shannon. She's the best. And she really holds me accountable with that. And we're constantly talking about, is this one really worth the amount of energy and time that I'm going to be putting into it? Is it really a project that I can pour my passion into and is worth the time and money and energy that I'm going to have to give to it, because I'm going to give myself my all to whatever I sign up for.
Yeah.
And it's a lesson. I'm not great at it yet, because I built my career around saying yes. Really, I did. I mean, the thing that I always said was the first 5 years I said yes to everything. I literally didn't say no to a single project in 5 years. And those relationships are what now, buoy me moving forward. Right. And now I'm at a place where I need to be better at saying no. And she's great about it. She really keeps me honest and trying to, we always keep the conversation. I'm like, yeah, but I want to, she's like, Aaron, is this really worth your time?
Yeah.
I'm like, right. So it's something that I'm continuing to work on, but
so then, with teaching, you see a lot of auditions, good, bad, otherwise. Where do actors fall short in your mind in terms of auditioning? Is there like a common space or place that they fall short?
There's a bunch of things. I mean, I think that one of the main things is that it takes them too long to get into the story. That they spend the first 30 seconds warming into it. The reality is that we're done. We've made our decision within the first 5-10 seconds, right? And anything from beyond that confirms our point of view or negates, right? Yep. So that beginning is so friggin' essential. And there are a number of tools that we can use to sort of launch us in a great way that really can make this take off.
Yeah.
So that's one thing I know for sure. I think another thing that people sort of fall short on is remembering how important it is to make sure that it's active. People love to make reflective choices instead of active choices. And while there is a place for reflective things in art and in life, it's not the most exciting choice. And so when we're looking at auditions, it's usually not the first choice you want to make. So that's another thing. And then I think it's a lot of the work that we do before the room, that, having the voice as strong as we can get it, have our body be able to tell the story that we needed to tell, and then letting all of that go. And here's the main thing: connecting into what makes you special. And I'll tell you for sure, the thing that doesn't make you special is your high notes. Right? I mean, that's the thing, right? I mean, and everybody thinks that if I sing the highest note, if I sing the biggest note, if I sing the loudest note, if I can show them that I can sing, that I'm going to get this job. And the reality is it's not. Because look, we're in New York City, the biggest center of musical theater in the world. This is where everyone is, which means that if you're competing, that means everyone can sing. And all of them can sing exceptionally well, and probably most of them can sing better than you, right? So don't put your focus there. Put your focus on the only thing that makes you unique, which is you. What are the things that you personally believe and are passionate about and are connected to that you can bring into the room and put on the table and make your humanity the thing that leads you the charge and goes, this is who I am as a human, as an artist. There is literally no one else that can do that one thing. And that's what we have to put our focus on.
Yeah. So if someone says to you, Aaron, I know what makes me unique, but is that like the way I react to sadness in a song? Is that what would make you unique, showing your reaction to sadness in a song?
Well, no, because the thing about reaction to sadness, right, is a passive action. Right. So, what I would say is it's about where your passion lies. I would say it's about how you respond. I think that's the difference. React or respond. Those are two really closely related words, but that are the difference between passive and active. How do you respond to sadness? What happens and what do you do when you're feeling that emotion or that connection or that moment of humanity or whatever? As opposed to how do I respond is a sense of something that is sort of internal and sort of separated from action. And in what we learn is that by observing life in every minute of our life, we're doing something. We're doing something, you know, and usually we're doing something with or to other people. And so if there is anyone else on the stage or anyone else in the room, you are probably interacting in some way with them, trying to get something, trying to do something. And that's what we want to lean into. We want to lean into that active behavior, and then finding, you know, how do you personally do that that's unique based on your life experiences that led you to this moment.
Yeah. Do you focus on the moment before the 16 bars and the moment after the 16 bars as well?
I spend a lot of time talking about the moment before, and I'm not interested. You know, there's this phrase, the moment before, right? That's a phrase we've all heard a million times.
Yeah.
I'm actually not so interested in that. I don't really care about the 3 minutes before, the 2 minutes before, the 30 seconds before. I really don't. The only thing that I really care about is what I call the pinch, which again I talked about earlier, pinching and ouching. But I've taken it and applied it specifically to the 1 second before you start singing that your lyric is the ouch to. So what's the thing that is said or done that makes you have no choice but to inhale and say, "Oh, what a glorious morning," or "Oh, what a beautiful morning."
Yeah.
Or what is the thing that you pinch and ouch and you say, you know, oh gosh, what's a good example of a song that I mean, every song, every monologue is that moment. Is in response to something, right? And so we need that specific pinch that allows us to respond, and that is what will allow us to stay active and stay connected to our scene partner. So I talk a lot about the pinch, because here's the other thing: you change the pinch, you change the entire performance, right? Somebody kisses you, and the first lyric is "I love you." That's gonna that kiss and that response is one thing. Somebody walks away from you and you say, "I love you," because you're trying to get them to stay. That's a completely different performance. So that moment, that kiss, that walk away, that slap, that "I love you," "I hate you," whatever the comment or the thing that happens is, it's the impetus that makes the entire piece happen.
Oh, my goodness. This would be part 3 where we just focus on auditions alone. How have you learned to control your emotions?
Well, that's a hard one. That's a complicated one,
Yeah.
right? I mean, you know, we have to look at so much about our lives and our past and who we are as an artist and who we are as a person. And, you know, I'm a bit of a odd duck in some ways, you know, and I think that I have a very complicated relationship with emotion, and a lot of that stems from some things in my family life in terms of my growing up. You know, I have a brother who we adopted when he was very young, and in my high school years in particular, there was a lot of drama. There was a lot of challenge in our house around all different issues. And one of the things that the way that impacted me was twofold. One was that I was not able to be the focus, the problem, the situation. So I was always moving to the positive, moving to the solving, moving to the whatever. So there was a little bit of a pushing that emotion away. Simultaneously, the other thing that I was doing was I got out of the house. I buried myself, but it sounds like a negative, but in fact, it ended up being a very positive thing, you know, surrounding myself by my art. I was in every show that I could be in. I was in band, I was in choir, I was in, you know, like everything I could get, my dance class, like everything I could get my hands on to get out of the house, and because I loved it, right? And so there, you know, I had a lot of, like, you know, covering energy in terms of that the emotion that happened. So I learned how to control it, right? I don't know if that's a positive or negative, but then I'll tell you, the thing that happened was that it got really hard then to access it. Right? So my work as an artist, especially through undergrad, went to undergrad at Shenandoah University, got a BFA in musical theater. I would say one of the things that I was really bad at was accessing my emotion, like really bad. I had a lot of craft, and so I was able to fake it fairly well. but the actual truth and connective material wasn't there. The actual, I would say, like I said earlier, right? Inspiration and craft. There wasn't a lot of inspiration. There was an extraordinary amount of craft. It got me through the day and got me a lot of really great opportunities through that. But I was not connected to my emotions very much at all. I went to grad school, and while in grad school, I got beat up very, very hard by my acting teachers, and rightfully so, because I was not connecting my emotions into my work. And they said, God bless him, Jim Wise. I love him to death. He was my acting teacher. He said to me very point blank, he was like, "You got to go get therapy, kid. You're not accessing your emotions. You don't know what's important to you, so you can't do any good work." So I didn't do it for very long, but I did. I went and had some therapy, and I talked to somebody about it, and I started figuring out how to access my emotions more. I also simultaneously was dating my now wife, and she also was instrumental in allowing me to get more and more connected to who I am as an artist and as a human and what was important to me. And then the thing that changed it all, amazingly, maybe not amazingly to everyone else out there who is a parent, is that you have kids. It changes everything. From that moment of Devin entering my life, and then even more when we had Zoe, even just because, not that she's that we now have 2 children, so there's even more emotion there. Now, I'm the biggest softie that exists. It is hard for me to get through things without crying, without emoting, without connecting to the things that are important to me. I cry watching So You Think You Can Dance. I cry watching, getting in a show when I'm watching that story. I can connect into my art. It's amazing how different of a human that I am from where I started. All of that, I don't know if any of that really answered your question.
It did.
But what I would say is it has been a complicated journey, and it is something that I think like I said, I think I'm an odd duck in that many people, it's emotion first and craft second. For whatever reason, for me, it was craft first, emotion second.
Yeah.
And so I have a much, much stronger ability to connect now, and simultaneously I know how to apply my craft, and I know what to do to hold it right in that sweet spot where you're simultaneously connected and emotion and connected to your emotion and also able to tell the story. I don't know.
Which is exactly how we started this episode.
I guess it is.
Talking
Yeah, I guess
about
it is.
you
Yeah.
singing
Yeah,
that
yeah.
song in the courtroom parade.
Yeah, I guess it is.
I asked this question because by nature, humans, our emotions control us. And then because of something traumatic, we learn to control our emotions, good, bad, or otherwise. And I find that some of the best performers in any field, not just theater, have great control of their emotions because you're nervous before you go into audition. You shut that off, and then 2 seconds later, you're crying over your dead child. Do you know what I mean, though?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's that kind of control, I think, that separates the people who right before are like, oh, I hope I get it. I hope and it's like, when do you compartmentalize in a healthy way?
Right.
And like, it's like readjusting.
The other thing I would say about that, to talking about the emotions and nervousness around auditions, I think there's also 2 other things at play. One of them is that, so there's the good one and then the not as good one, right? So the not as good one for me is that, I also, part of my growth as an artist has been one where, in high school, in undergrad, I was a cocky son of a bitch, right? I was convinced that I was the best.
honesty.
I was like, I'm the best, right? And that confidence, that I can do this, I know I'm the guy, like that thing. While it's certainly something that I have, I feel like I'm in a very different place, and in a good way. I feel much more connected and at a peace with my companions and my peers and my colleagues. I also still have that ability to flip that switch a little bit, and I use that sometimes as a tool when I'm going into an audition to help me get over nerves. As I can go, I can reach back to that experience and go, I know I that feeling of like nobody can touch me is a really valuable boost walking in the room. it allows you in some ways to access. I said it was a negative. I don't know. Maybe it's not a negative. Is it allows you to
As long
access.
as it's not hurting people.
Right. I mean, yeah. What it does is it does allow you to access your own point of view and honesty and artistry, because you can walk in and go. I walk in and go. This is mine. This is my version. It's not about pleasing you. It's about doing my thing.
And if you don't want me, good luck with your production.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And hopefully we'll work on the next one together, you know?
Yeah.
So that's one piece. The other thing that has really shifted and allowed me to be more successful in that world is the continuing growth of relationships. Is that, you know, I did some math a while ago, because I'm just that type A type of person and trying to figure out, you know, I kept saying, man, I really think that most of my jobs have come off of relationships. And then I sat down and started figuring that out. And it's the statistics for me personally are literally staggering. I mean, I've basically done somewhere in the like 55 professional jobs, somewhere in there, 55, 54, something like that. And like 48 of them are because I knew someone in the room. Yeah. I mean, that's staggering.
Literally, because you're friends with
the
people working.
That's right. Yeah. And I often say, like, you know, people go, oh, it's who you know. I go, thank God it's who you know. Otherwise, you would literally be starting over every single day. Otherwise, we'd have no opportunity to grow our relationships. And you know, I talk about it as you know, in business, there's the corporate ladder. Right? We have this ladder. People climb up this ladder and then they move sideways. They climb up another ladder and whatever. Yeah. In art, in theater in particular, we climb up this ladder because we get this job. And at the end of every job, we jump off the ladder and we fall to our death, usually. Right? And then we have to start again. And every single job, we jump off and probably fall to our death and then climb again and jump off. And But here's the key, is that in every job, there are, and not only jobs, but in auditions, in relationships, in opportunities, there are opportunities for forming relationship, and those relationships slowly create a web of humans, a net that basically slowly grows. And yeah, you climb up that ladder and you jump off and you miss the net and then you climb again. But eventually that net starts to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And what happens is you jump off that ladder and the net catches you and can spring you right back up to where you just were on the ladder. And then you can keep climbing again and jump off, and then it can jump you back up to a rung on the ladder.
And the net gets bigger.
And the net gets bigger. And with every relationship you have. That's right. And it has more spring in it. And that's the key to longevity, is that you have to have relationships that can keep you moving. And so to swing this back to the question you had is like, how do you control your nerves when you walk into the room? Well, a massive, massive part of my comfort in the room is that now I have been in New York City for 13 years. I've been working professionally since my junior year in high school. So that's 13 plus 4 plus 3. So I'm in like 20 some years of working professionally now, right? The number of people and relationships that I have is plentiful. It's large. So when I walk into a room, the odds that someone or multiple people or everyone in the room is someone that I know grows every day. And so oftentimes the nerves go away because I know, oh yeah, I know those people. I know how they work. I like those people. I like working with that director, that music director, that choreographer, that pianist, that accompanist, that casting director, that reader. Like I just have relationships that when I walk in the room, it feels like rehearsal or home, or it doesn't feel like the pressure cooker that it felt when I first moved here and didn't know anyone. Yeah. And that's a massive part of this shift too.
You might have just answered this question. Is there a fast track to booking more work as a performer, or is the answer meeting more people?
I think it's meeting more people. Well, I guess here's the other thing that we can talk about is that there's no right or wrong here. There's not a better or worse, but there are artists that are interested in doing this for a little while. And there are artists that are interested in doing this for
a lot of while.
Yeah, right. And or are interested in dipping their toe in the water and seeing if it works out, and then going from there. And again, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I mean, they're just what they are. I can only really speak from my experience. And the thing that I know more than anything else, one of the things that I know the most about my life is I know that I am meant to be in the theater my entire life. That is what I'm going to do my whole life. Doesn't mean that I won't take other opportunities like I've done this film thing or whatever, these other things that might happen, but I'm a lifer, okay? Yeah. And one of the things that allows me to have is a sense and a commitment to the long term, to the longevity, to the growth. And while some people, because they're dipping their toe or whatever, and again, no judgment on that, there's a need to get it done now. And so they're trying to find the fast track. I'm not interested in the fast track. I'm interested in the sustainable. I'm interested in what happens after that job. Yeah, maybe I do get this. You know, like I said, I moved to the city and 2 years later I was doing a Broadway show. That's a really fast track. But when I booked that show, certainly I was ecstatic. I was, it was thrilling, not to take anything away from it, but much of my thought was going, yeah, but what's next? How do I keep going? And so, you know, I was doing that Broadway. It was Dr. Seuss, How the Grinch Stole Christmas. I did that show, and one of the things that I was doing while I was in that show was making sure authentically that I was creating relationship with everyone in that room. And I'll tell you, the number of jobs that came out of that are incredible. Just that, you know, because my second Broadway show, Ragtime, I still to this day say was because of Grinch. Because what happened was the second year I went out on the national tour of Grinch, okay? We were in Baltimore, doing the production. We were in tech. I was running. I saw that Ragtime was auditioning, had an open call at the Kennedy Center, which is like an hour away. And I said, oh my gosh, I got to go audition for that. I'm like an hour away. I got to drive over there. So I met with our associate music director, Sue. She played the piano for me while I was rehearsing the song I was about to do. The choreographer of The Grinch, who was in town because we were in tech, Bob Richards, walks into the room, says, Aaron, what are you doing? Why are you here an hour early, and why are you singing? We have tech starting in an hour. And I said, well, I'm going to go over and audition for the Kennedy Center and go in for Ragtime. And he said, oh my gosh, one of my best friends is directing that, Marcia. And I said, oh, well, that's cool. He said, I'll give her a call. And when I walked into the audition for Ragtime, not having any expectation, I walked in the room. I kid you not, Marcia Milgram Dodge, who directed that production, stood up, walked up to me, gave me a hug, and said, I'm so glad you're here. Bob Richards called and said you were coming. I'm thrilled that you're here. Now, obviously, I still had to be right for the part. I still had to do it. But those things, that's what creates relationship and creates job opportunity. That's one example. I mean, I then went on to becoming the assistant director and then associate director of The Grinch for years, because of the relationships that I formed being in the show. And then other people in that show turned into other jobs and it's just it all.
Annette.
Yeah. And it's not just because it was a Broadway show. That's literally been what's been happening my entire life. My entire life, from the very first job I ever had as an actor through all the way up. The reason I got The Grinch was because of a relationship with someone, Rachel Hoffman, who was working at Dave Clemens Casting when she cast me and my wife in a production of The Lost Colony in Manteo, North Carolina, like 3 years before that. No, it was longer than that. Like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years earlier, she had cast me in that production. And then I walked into the audition for The Grinch, the EPA for The Grinch, and there's Rachel Hoffman sitting there. And I hadn't seen her in probably 3 years. And she goes, Aaron, oh my gosh, how are you? What's going on? I said, oh, I'm here. I'm auditioning for The Grinch. She said, you're perfect for this show. I'm so glad you came in. I never would have thought of you. Yeah. You know what I mean? It's incredible. It's just been an amazing experience.
That's insane. I'm so glad you did that without me having to ask. Thank you. Thank you, because that's exactly what I want, is that order of events. Yeah. Did you set the goal of Broadway?
Well, yes and no. I mean, I think that as a young person in Wheeling, West Virginia, who's in all the shows and then goes to undergrad for musical theater. I mean, I think we all say I can't wait to be on Broadway. I want to be on Broadway, right? I mean, that's the thing that we say. I think that I did say that. I think I would be an idiot or lying if I said that I didn't think that and want that. But I would also say that I was deeply committed to a life in the theater. and that I knew that I wanted to be here for my life and wanted to figure that out and figure out how to be around and keep doing it. I mean, I'll tell one quick story about the Grinch. I'll say one of the most meaningful moments of my artistic life was opening night of the Grinch. My college freshman roommate, a guy named Dennis Clockerty Jr. We were roommates. We were musical theater majors together. We were roommates, and we as all people do, you're friends, but then you don't necessarily see them for a while. I probably hadn't seen him in 4 years, probably. We hadn't been in touch, like whatever. These things happen, right? Yeah. Opening night of the Grinch, I had a package on my mirror, and I opened it up, and it was a note and a picture from Dennis Clockerty Jr. that said, "I remember sitting in our dorm in freshman year talking about today. Congratulations." That was just so meaningful that he thought of me and remembered those conversations and thought to send me a gift on my opening night on Broadway. And it really spoke to, I guess I did think and want today to happen, Yeah. And that moment is something that's stuck in my head, and I know I'll cherish.
Wow. Yeah. Wow, that's a great story. Was Phantom what you thought it would be when you went into Phantom?
No. It's a fascinating experience. It's a bit of a beast, and it's really cool. And there's so much history there, that it's a challenging job, because how do you bring life to something with so much history and tradition? And how do you infuse it with your own artistry and simultaneously honor what came before? That's
Staying on that number 6 stage right.
Right. Yeah. That's
that way.
That's the challenge, right?
Yeah.
That's the challenge of that experience.
Yeah.
So, no, it was a really, really complicated, exciting, interesting, artistic experience.
Yeah. Are there common pieces of incorrect advice you hear in your field?
What do I hear? I don't think there's advice that's wrong. I think there's common wisdom that people hold on to. These things like, I have to go in and sing my highest notes. I have to like network, which is like such a slimy way of like creating relationship. The relationship comes out of authentic human behavior and connection, not I can do this for you, what can you do for me kind of experience, which I think people sort of think is what they need to be doing. I think that there's also a common think about like the common denominator. If I can make myself exactly what they want and like hit all these marks, then I'm valuable. And I think that in fact that's the opposite of what it is. It's become so bland that it's not interesting anymore. It's too vanilla. We need something that is complicated and interesting and unique and human. And I think that people slowly lose all the things that make them special in order to try to please everyone on the other side. And I think that's the opposite of what we should be doing. So I think that's the kind of thing that there's a lot of group think that sends people down paths that, just take them a long time to recover from.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's so true. Are there any mistakes you've made that have proved essential in learning?
Mistakes. I'm sure that there are. I'm sure there's plenty of them. I don't know that I'm thinking of any specific mistakes, but I can certainly tell you, I'll spin this question a little bit to a really a big learning lesson for me. And, that came out of, it's related to some of the stories I've told you already, which came out of the fact that I worked for 3 years in a row at the Utah Shakespeare Festival right out of grad school. And I spent 3 summers there, and I was a non-union actor. And I was working really, really hard to try to become an equity member in that company. That's what I wanted. And I knew, one of the things that can be very challenging is that at any theater, right, is that you're known as the non-union talent. You're really, really good at what you do. And yet when you move into the equity talent, there's a whole new pool of people that theater company or exist in the world that now you're competing with. And it's sometimes hard to make that transition. So, I was really like working my butt off those 3 years just with that goal in mind. If I want to be there as an equity actor, my 4th summer, like that's what I want. And it came time for that 4th summer and I didn't get an offer. And I was devastated, quite frankly. I was really, really disappointed. I was really sad about it and really down about the whole thing. And there was a little part of me that was like, I was like, but I deserve this, right? There's that experience that you have. Like, I worked my butt off for you. How dare you? Now, I never went that far, but like, that's like some of the things that sort of boil up in you, right?
Yeah.
And so what happened was I was kind of bummed about it. And then by luck, I mentioned Russ Trays already. He called me up for another project, and next thing I know, I'm working at Pennsylvania Shakes, and I was doing a production of Taming of the Shrew at Pennsylvania Shakes, and that was going along, and so that also meant Pennsylvania. That means Philly, right outside Philly. It means I'm pretty close to New York. And what ended up happening was I ended up getting a call back for The Grinch, and because I was not in Utah, I could go to the next callback and eventually book the show that was my Broadway debut.
I love stories
if I
like
had
this.
taken, if I had been given the offer
Yeah.
to go to
You
Utah
got what you
Shakes
wanted.
in the 4th, yeah, you know what I mean. And then here's the other thing that happened.
Yeah.
Then, shortly after, shortly thereafter, I did The Grinch. I did Ragtime and whatever. And then next thing I know, then I got asked to return to Utah Shakes as an equity actor, and I've been working there since. You know what I mean? So like the lesson for me was just that, it's okay. Like sometimes that door closing is exactly what it's supposed to be because it's going to open something else.
Do you believe life happens for you? Do you believe in that kind of thing? Like there's like a plan. I don't even mean to take it to like a religious place, but in the sense of like there's a path for you, and if you stay true to yourself, what you're supposed to get, you'll get.
Here's what I believe. My dad and my family has been instrumental in this feeling and this thought. And it's simply that, I and everyone, we all have gifts. We have these things that are innate in us, and whether that comes from God or nature or what, that's someone else's job to figure out, right? But what I do know is that I have these gifts and I'm supposed to use them. And I also know that if I give of myself and my skill and my talent and my time and my passion to the world, it will come back. That positivity, that willingness to connect and give and work, and that's something that is going to come back to you in some way, somehow down the line, whether that's a karma thing or whether that's a tit for tat. I don't know. I just know that when in my life I have been given an extraordinary amount of gifts from people, and most of them I can trace back to moments where we have connected on some deep level, or I have shared of my time and talent in a way that allowed warm feelings to exist and to grow and to allow us to look out for each other and care for each other at some point moving forward.
How do you view happiness?
I think I connect a lot of happiness to the work. And, like I said, so many of my relationships are deeply connected to work and productivity. That's so much of where I find my own happiness, is when I am entrenched, when I'm in it, when I'm working with other artists, when I'm when I'm at home, working with my kids on teaching them how to play soccer, or whatever it is, there's, with my wife, we're, we're looking at the calendar and going like, how are we going to fit all these things in? That's where I find my happiness. I find my happiness in the projects and the productivity and the forward momentum and the activity and in the connectedness and connectiveness that happens through that, the relationships that we form with our, some of my literal best friends in the world are clients, are the pianists that play for me when I'm teaching, are, and do I go and have do we go out and hang out and have beers afterwards? And do we get together and go to a movie? No, I don't do many of those things at all, to be perfectly honest. But I see them all the time and we're working, we're connecting. And that's not necessarily how other people find happiness, and it's not necessarily what makes other people happy. I know that, and that's great. There's no judgment there. I only know what makes me happy and what I feel connected to, and I'm usually 100 times more alive in the middle of it than sitting by myself reading a book or watching a movie or going to the beach. Although going to the beach is kind of the other thing that I freaking love. So I don't know. Maybe that's a bad example. Going to the beach, sitting, in a field. You know what I mean? Yeah. So for me, so much of my happiness is absolutely related to work.
Wow, this conversation has been absolutely incredible.
I'm so glad.
We have to do another one.
Okay, cool. It's been my pleasure.
Now that I'm getting it on record here,
yeah,
we
there you
have
go.
to do another one.
There you go.
Okay, so as we wrap up here, curious question for you. Do you have, this is random, do you have a best purchase under $100 that you've made recently that's improved your life?
You know what it is? TSA pre-check.
Oh.
Let me tell you. It's $85 for 5 years, 7 years. I don't remember the exact thing. I just bought it. I bought it a month ago.
Okay.
I've gone on 3 flights since then. What was I doing with my life before that? Waiting in line for hours and hours. I mean, It's mind-blowing how idiotic I was that I had not purchased this beforehand. I went to Denver just recently, and I was getting on a flight from Denver to Florida, and I got there and I looked at the line, and the line, there's a big pic, they have the little things that say how long the lines are. It said 40 minutes from here to your gate. I was like, oh gosh, this is intense. Okay. I hope I have enough time. And then I was like, okay, but I have pre-check, so hopefully that'll get me through. And I walked to pre-check, and I looked at my watch, and I walked through pre-check, and I put my bags on. I didn't take off my shoes, and I didn't take the things out, and I walked through, and I got to the other end and looked at my watch, and it had been 4 minutes.
Oh my.
And I went, yeah, that was the best $85 I've ever spent.
That's $85 a year?
It's like $85 for 5 years.
Oh.
No, it's crazy.
Oh.
Why? Yeah.
Is this all domestic airports
all
or
domestic.
Major ones?
Yeah,
only
it's
domestic?
No, it's all domestic, but I think
all.
I think it's all airline. I think. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've only just started with it.
Well,
so
the
maybe
ones
I'm
you go to.
But the ones you go to,
LAX,
Denver, LaGuardia, whatever.
Yeah.
And maybe I shouldn't be saying this because then everyone's gonna get pre-check, and then the lines are gonna get long, and it's gonna suck. But I can tell you, it's awesome.
Why? How do you qualify as a what does the $85 say that you promise you won't put something in your shoe? How does that?
They do a massive background check.
Oh, okay.
They do there's a whole process. You have to do an interview.
Okay.
It's a thing.
Okay.
But they've made it pretty easy. It's not insane. It used to be really crazy, but recently, the place you do your interview is 34th and 8th.
It's easier than the DMV.
Oh, way easier than the DMV.
God,
you
I'm
put
sold.
in. Yeah, it's amazing.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's
and
incredible.
especially as someone who goes on tour and I travel a decent amount because I'm going to universities to teach, and I travel a decent amount, not a ton, but easily 10, 15 flights a year,
enough where you can save 40 minutes.
Oh my Lord, it's so worth it.
What's coming up for you?
Couple things. So I continually teach through Max Theatrics. I also do private coaching. So you can look at maxtheatrics.com and get all of the information about our classes. You could also email us at hello@maxtheatrics.com and we can get you information, and you can also set up private coaching with me if you want to through that. Also, I am about 2 weeks away from starting. Well, I guess when this thing airs, I will be in the middle of performing in the National Tour of White Christmas. So we're hitting 6 cities in 7 weeks. It's going to be really exciting. This will be my 3rd year doing the show. I play Mike Nolte, the frantic stage manager. And it's a blast. So that's really exciting. That's gonna carry me from November 1st to December 31st. Then Preston DeFrancis and I and our company is deep in the development of our second film. We just finished our screenplay for it. We have just started sending it out into the ether, trying to raise the money to film our second movie. We don't have a timeline on that yet, but we're hoping to, we'd like cameras to roll within the next 2 years, if not faster. Based on how long fundraising takes.
Another horror film? Awesome.
Yeah, another genre film. Yep.
Sweet. Okay.
Yep. We call them like elevated genre picks. They're that's just sort of our way of saying that they're not focused on the blood and the guts. They're scary.
Yeah.
But they're not that the blood and the guts is secondary. It's really we're really interested in compelling, complicated characters in propulsive plots. And that's really what our focus is always on in terms of our storytelling.
You call an elevated genre film?
An elevated genre film. It's sort of our fancy way of describing, the movies that we compare ourselves to are things like It Follows, The Babadook, The Witch.
Not quite a thriller, because I wouldn't call it a thriller.
They're not really thrillers. They're not really horror. They're not blood and guts horror movies.
Yeah, no.
But they are horror movies. They're just there's something about them that makes them a little bit more artistic and a little less B-movie, which again, I like a good B-movie, but it's just not what we do, So I'm working on that, and then I can't tell you all the details of it, but it looks like in the spring I am most likely going to be directing a cool musical that I'm looking forward to working on. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. See, got so many pokers in the fire.
Hey, dude, like I said, you do a little bit of each thing, you can maybe make a living at it.
I love that. From our whole conversation here, has a word or a phrase that you can metaphorically put on a billboard come to mind, something that you would share with millions of people?
I think I would probably zero in on just this idea of, creating community and how it's the thing that allows you to have both a joyful and a full life in the theater. And I think that also we haven't talked about it, but I would say the other thing that's really essential is having a home life, a family that you care deeply about and that support you in that journey, because they have to make a lot of sacrifices too. My kids, miss me. My wife, I'm out of town for White Christmas, and she's going to be the primary caregiver for 2 months. That's a big, huge commitment. And I'm incredibly thankful for their commitment to that. And I think that it makes it worth it when you have the opportunities that this life in the theater It allows us to constantly have adventures. We get to go on the trips to go to the cities where I'm doing shows. I get to bring that community of love and life and empathy and connection home with me. I get to come home feeling positive about my life, about the thing that I'm doing, and I like to think that this time that we're living in right now is an incredibly complicated time. And if there's one thing that I wish that we had more of, it was empathy and our ability to look at someone who's very different than us and understand why and how they're feeling and what they're doing, as a way to create connectiveness in this world. And I think that art does that. It allows you to emotionally empathize and sympathize with the characters in the show, with the experiences that these other people are going through. And so I like to think that that's putting like a little drop of goodness and hopefully forward momentum in the world. And because I'm part of that world, it allows me to come home knowing that I'm helping and that I feel good about my life, and that brings me joy and allows me to be joyful and full of life with my family, and simultaneously they give me the life and the desire to go back out and continue to make a difference. And I think that that's a really important thing. None of those things would fit on a billboard.
Yeah. I mean, they would. It would just be a really, really big billboard.
Oh, man.
Aaron, this has been a joy.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
sitting down with me. Seriously.
So much my pleasure.
It was really
Absolutely.
great.
Absolutely.
Ladies and gentlemen, Aaron Galligan-Stierle. After we finished the interview, I was marveling still over Aaron's incredible work ethic, and he had a few more thoughts to share on it. So here are his final thoughts on work ethic.
All right. So you know where the place that I learned that incredible need for professionalism, there's, you learn it from a lot of things, but the one place I learned it the most was my extraordinarily important to me theater teacher in high school, woman named Fran Schoolcraft. She was hard as nails, man. She was hard as nails, and she had this list of rules, and these are the things that you did, and you showed up early to rehearsal, and if you were late for a rehearsal, the first time you got a talking to, the second time you had to sit out a rehearsal, the third time you had to buy the company pizza. She was not messing around, and she had these rules of she was very specific. She said, first day of you're there, you're gonna learn the blocking. The next time you come back after we've set a scene, you are off book, guarantee every time. And she had just this series of things and rules of this is how we behave professionally in the theater. And it drilled into my soul. And I have carried those incredibly essential lessons with me through everything. And I'm constantly thinking of Fran Schoolcraft and oh yeah, I got it. Yeah. Like over my shoulder, right? I got to get there. I got to be there on time. I got to make sure that I'm learned my lines in time. I got to make sure, but it is amazing. The incredible amount of lessons that I learned from her. Big time.
You've been listening to Entertainment X, the podcast. You can follow Entertainment X on Instagram at _EntertainmentX_. If you haven't yet, go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join Clay next week for another curiosity conversation on Entertainment X. Thank you for listening.